everyone, and welcome to another episode of Her Side, His Side. I'm Dr. Carol, and what we are going to talk about this time is how to keep your marriage strong. Now, you don't actually have to be married for this to be relevant to your life. You could be in a relationship, even a new relationship or a long-term relationship. It doesn't really matter. I just happened to title it How to Keep Your Marriage Strong. But, this can be really relevant, really, for a lot of people in a lot of different kinds of relationships. So let's go ahead and talk about the first thing. First of all, it's really helpful to know your love languages. Now, you may or may not know what love languages are. If you don't, I will explain them to you. Okay, so they were created by a man named Dr. Gary Chapman, and he is a marriage therapist, and he saw a lot of couples, obviously, in his office. And so after a long time, many years, he noticed some very obvious patterns in people and how they loved each other and how they wanted to be loved. So really what love languages are is, how do you want your partner to express love to you? And how do you naturally express love to your partner? Now, everybody's different, and that's the problem that he said, that you might have one love language and your partner might have another love language, and you just don't even know that you have different love languages. And so when you have different love languages, you don't understand each other and you don't feel loved. So these are the different love languages. There are 5 of them. So first of all, there's words of affirmation, the one at the top. Now that is if you naturally tell people, I love you, you're beautiful, thank you, I appreciate you, that would be your giving love language. Or maybe you want to receive that way with words. So you want your partner to say, I love you, I appreciate you, you're beautiful, you're awesome, blah, blah, blah. So you want to hear it. You want to hear how much they love you and adore you and appreciate you. Now, giving of gifts is when somebody feels loved when their partner gives them gifts. Makes sense? So, they come home with flowers or candy, or they just saw something that they thought you would like and they give it to you. That would be giving of gifts. And if that's how you show your love, then that's your language too, that you give people things to show your love. Now, touch means physical touch. That's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, it can be anything from sexual intimacy to just holding hands to cuddling to hugging. Not everybody likes to be touched. A lot of people don't like hugging. They don't like cuddling. It makes them feel like they're being constricted, but other people just need that physical closeness really to feel loved. Now, acts of service would be things like, if you see on the bottom there, acts of service is doing things for your partner. So this, for an example, when I was in a relationship in graduate school, he wasn't very big on the words, saying I loved you. He was in the beginning, but as time went on, we were together for 4 years, he really didn't say it as much as I did. And so I kind of thought he didn't love me as much. But looking back, I realized that his love language was acts of service. So he would go and change my oil for me, and he would do other things. He would cook for me. He would do things for me. And I appreciated that he did that, but I didn't really realize that that's how he expressed his love for me, by doing things for me. Now, time is spending time with another person, the quality time. So people who have that love language just want to spend a lot of time with a person and want to be with them all the time. Whereas other people, might feel smothered and don't need to be with someone that much, but some people do. So, I could go much deeper into this, but, the point is I am still, but used to be more so a words person. I wanted my partner to say I love you and to say things, because that's how I grew up and that's how my family was. So I thought that's really how you express love. But the older I've gotten, the more I've realized that acts of service are really important to me too, because I've had other partners who didn't do anything for me. my ex-husband, no offense to him, he's a great guy, but that just wasn't his love language. You know, like I was 8 months pregnant with my son once, and he came home and said, oh, you have like no gas in your car, so you're gonna have to go get it. And I'm like, I'm 8 months pregnant, couldn't you put a little gas in my car for me? You know, so it made me feel unloved that he didn't do that. Not that he didn't love me, but you see the point here is that, let's say, you know, you love getting gifts, right? And that's how you feel loved, but your partner wants to spend time with you all the time and you feel smothered by that. And so you just don't understand each other. So the point of this is like, you can go online and you can try to figure out what your love language is. There are probably quizzes out there, and just read up on it and see which one, you know, because how we give to others isn't always how we want to receive love either. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So you need to figure out how you naturally give to people your love and how you want to receive it, and same for your partner. So you both really need to understand that, because then once you understand, you won't feel rejected or unloved because your partner has a different love language. So that is really, really important. Another really important thing to understand is what's called an attachment style. Now, attachment styles start really early in our childhood. It's really related to how our parents were with us and how we attach to them. I mean, some people just have naturally different attachment styles than others, but a lot of it really is about how we were raised. Now, the first one is an anxious attachment style. So that kind of person, you know, you always hear the person who does the chasing in a relationship, and you know, maybe the other person is the runner and the other is a chaser. You know, people who have an anxious attachment tend to chase and maybe want to spend so much time with the other person. They just need like a lot of reassurance from the other person in order to feel secure in the love. Now, the avoidant attachment is someone who avoids attachment. You know, this might be the kind of person who, you know, maybe your husband or your boyfriend or girlfriend or wife spends a lot of time alone. You know, maybe they're playing video games in the other room all night, 24/7. I had a boyfriend like that once too, where like after a while, that's all he did was play video games. And I'm like, hello, I'm still here, you know, notice me. But you know, so some people just avoid attachment for a variety of reasons. I mean, maybe they're afraid of attachment, maybe they just don't like it. You know, there are a lot of different reasons for that, but nonetheless, you know, imagine having someone who is an anxious attachment, someone with an avoidant attachment. You're definitely going to have a chaser and a runner, and that's not going to go very well, right? Now, secure attachment is when you don't feel the need to chase, you don't need to feel to pull away, you are fine. You're like, if you want to be around me, cool, great, I'll be around you too, and I'll attach to you. If you don't want to be around me, fine, I'm not going to take it personally, I love myself, whatever. So, you know, people with secure attachments aren't afraid of commitment and attachment, but they're not afraid of being alone either. Like, they're not going to chase after anyone who isn't showing them, you know, the love and the attention that they feel they deserve. So, you know, it's not saying that any of you are better or worse if you have an anxious attachment or avoidance or secure. It's not about being a better person or anything, but you do need to understand how you are, how your partner is, and how that might clash, if you can understand what I'm talking about. So, I mean, even like I have a secure attachment, but I've been with avoidant people before, and that didn't work for me. But I've also dated briefly some anxious type people, and that didn't work for me either. So I do best with someone who also has a secure attachment style. Now, maybe two people with anxious attachment might do well together, two with avoidant attachment might do better together. But even if you just understand, that is the first huge step, especially if you're in a long-term marriage. You know, the love languages and the attachment styles can really just be a real eye-opener and go, oh, okay, you know, like this person isn't rejecting me. They're just different. They just show their love differently. They show their attachment differently. So different isn't bad, it's just different. So empathy. Empathy is so important. Now, I teach interpersonal communication classes at a university and also gender communication classes. And I always start out the classes by saying that if everybody could do one thing differently in life, I think the world not only would be a better place, we might have world peace even, I don't know. But empathy is, different than sympathy. Sympathy is like, oh, I feel really sorry for you, but you don't really identify with the other person. So empathy is really seeing the other person's point of view, taking their perspective, as this chart really says. Don't judge them. Consider their emotions, not just your own. So not being selfish. You have to look at it from the other person's point of view. And for most people, or a lot of people, that's really hard to do. It's sad. I mean, I'm not judging you if it's hard for you to do that, but it's probably hard because, we are inherently selfish people. Think about it. Our survival instincts are selfish, right? I mean, in order to survive, back in the caveman days, they had to be selfish. Let's say there's only one piece of meat left and there are 5 other people and you're all are starving. Well, whoever gets to it first and eats it first is most selfish. Well, they're the one that's going to live, right? Because the other people didn't get to it, and so they're going to die faster. That's kind of a strange example, but it's true. It's kind of hardwired into us to be selfish for survival reasons. But when it comes to relationships, selfishness does not work. Empathy, understanding the other person's point of view is much better. And so try to step out of yourself, try to recognize when you're being selfish and maybe not really seeing your partner's point of view, because, perception is reality. Now think about that for a second. Perception is reality. So perception is how you see something, and that is your reality. That doesn't mean that it's your partner's reality, because they have a different perception many times. And so they think that's their reality. So who's right? Are you right or your partner's right? Well, neither of you are right and neither of you are wrong. You just have different perspectives, different realities. And so you have to try to understand each other's perception and perspective. It's not easy to do, but you don't even have to agree with them, but just try to understand them, because you know how you feel when somebody doesn't try to see your point of view, right? Well, you're making them feel that way. So both people need to try to empathize with each other and see each other's point of view. That is huge. Yes, you have to work through conflict too. Everybody has conflict, and most people think conflict is bad. And honestly, it's not inherently bad. It's just how you manage it that really matters. So we live in a competitive world, let's face it. I mean, look at these 2 people fighting. It's a funny little picture, but we are taught to compete. We are taught to win. We watch football games, basketball games. Our whole world is really like centered around competition. Even the corporate world, you have to compete with your peers to rise up the corporate ladder. Well, that's just ingrained in our culture, but that doesn't do us very well in private life, And, the only way that we learn how to work through conflict is probably from seeing what our parents did. And usually our parents don't really know how to do it either. So there are 5 different ways, and I'm not going to go through absolutely all of them right now, because then this would just be hours long, and I'll just do another video on it sometimes. But most people, when they try to work through conflict, they compete with each other. They think win, lose, I'm going to win, you're going to lose. And, that never works, because the loser always loses out. So, you don't want to approach it that way. There is no winner or loser. You should be a team, right? So don't think of each other as opponents, because that's competing. Now, avoiding doesn't work either. My parents did that for, over 2 decades. They just avoided, and then they never solved any problems. So that doesn't work either. Accommodating is when someone just gives in to the other person. That's not good when it's always the same person, always giving in to the same person. if it's like mutual, and maybe not so bad, but still not great, because you're really not coming to any sort of like real conclusion and real solution together, right? Now, compromising is what it sounds like. I give a little, you give a little. That's a lot better than the other ones. But the best is called collaborating, where you really think of each other as a team. You're all on the same team. You're not competing against each other. You are competing with each other. Like, you're on the same team. You're coming up with solutions together. That's how it should be. So you really need to figure out how you can handle your conflict better, because there's no relationship, no marriage, none on the planet really that has not had some sort of conflict. So you try to work through it better with your partner, because you have to solve the problems, but you have to solve them constructively, okay? And don't forget date night and intimacy. So, especially if you have children. I know I've had children. My kids are teenagers now, but they're exhausting, especially the more you have, it kind of drains you. I mean, I love my kids. The best thing I ever did was having the kids. But at the same time, if you don't, take care of not only yourself, but you two as a couple, then you guys will lose each other. There's so many couples really that, the kids leave and they have an empty nest syndrome, and then they look at each other and they're like, who are you? Like, I don't even recognize you anymore, because, we spent all these years going to kids' soccer games and this and that, and it's all about the kids. It's all about the kids. And then all of a sudden, 25, 30 years have passed, and you're like, what happened to the person I married? Because I don't know you, because we haven't really stayed connected with each other. So, I don't care how young your kids are. I don't know, even if you have a newborn baby, you need to do this now, and it's never too late. At least once a week, go out if you can. If you can't, if you don't have money to do that, go sit in a park and, drink a pop or something, and, do something together. It doesn't have to cost money, but make it a regular occurrence. You need to keep connected, because that keeps up the emotional intimacy. You need to stay emotionally connected, because if you're not, you're just going to drift away from each other. And the farther you drift, the harder it is to bring it back. So it's best to not drift away in the first place, right? So both people really need to be in on this. And then, of course, sexual intimacy. Now, everybody has their own sexual needs, their own sexual drives. Some people don't need it much. Some people need it all the time. Most of us are somewhere in between. But, there are a lot of chemicals that are released when you have sex with your partner, and they do bond you. I'm not an expert on that, but I do know there are enough, chemicals in our brains and hormones that go off that really do keep us bonded to each other when we have sex. So the longer you go without sex, the more you feel emotionally distant from each other. So, spending time together, having emotional intimacy and sexual intimacy are really intertwined. Again, I'm not saying, oh, go and have sex every day. That's totally up to you as a couple. But another problem a lot of couples have is that their sex drives are mismatched. One person wants it more than the other, and then that's a problem. So maybe you can compromise a little bit. A lot of people, especially men, sometimes have porn addictions, and if you do some research on what porn does to your brain, it really desensitizes you to real life sex. Like, they see so much extreme sex that goes on that, once they see their partner in real life, it's just not that exciting to them anymore. So, if you have a porn addiction, or maybe you suspect your spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend has a porn addiction, you might want to look into that too, because that really drives a barrier between two people when they can't, because the more somebody consumes porn, the less they want their partner in real life. So that is very important. Another thing to consider is your personality type. Now, some people may have heard of the Myers-Briggs personality type, and some might not have. If you haven't, it's been around a long time, but basically there are about 16 different personality types. And if you're curious, you can go to 16personalities.com and take a quiz. It's not that long. And so you can really understand each other's personality type. So for instance, mine is an ENFJ, and I'm not going to go into what they all mean, but that means I'm basically an extrovert, and these are kind of some of the characteristics that I have, you know, optimistic, reliable, and tolerant, and honest, observant, you know, all this stuff. I mean, I'm not saying it's, you know, exactly me, but it really does. You know, when I took this test, I read everything. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is me to a T. Like, for instance, one of the big things about this is that I hate details. Like, that's why I hate cooking, because I don't like chopping up every little thing. I don't know, it's detail and it's so much, and I can't stand it. It bores me. Or laundry. I hate laundry, you know, so I let it pile up. And, you know, that has presented some problems for some of my partners, that I'm not very good at doing laundry. But it's not because I'm lazy or because I'm a slob, even though I'm not the neatest person in the world, but I'm certainly not the slobbiest. It really does relate to my personality type. And so, you know, I've known too many couples where like one was an extrovert and one was an introvert. I had this problem with some of my exes as well, where, you know, I was like, come on, let's go out, let's go do something. And they're like, no, I really don't feel like it. You know, they're more homebodies. They wanted to, you know, just not socialize as much as I did. And, you know, I accepted it, but I wasn't happy about it. But I know other people who, like, the extrovert will drag out the introvert, and the introvert will feel like, you don't care that I want to stay home. You're like, why don't you care about that? And then the extrovert is like, why don't you ever want to come out with me? You know, so they take it personally. That's my point. So once you understand your partner's personality type, you won't take it as personally. You'll know, oh, well, that's just who they are. And, you know, they don't want to come out with me to the party, not because they don't love me, but because, you know, being out at a party drains them. You know, it does. For introverts, being with people, it drains them. For extrovert, it charges them up. So anyway, I could go on and on about this as well. So try to understand each other, and then just accept who your partner is, even if it's very different from you. You know, that's okay. But, you know, just make sure that you understand each other. You have to put in effort. I know that sounds obvious, but I can't tell you how many people just don't. And I always like to say that relationships are like trees or plants, or, you know, some living thing. Like, you know, I'm really bad at keeping houseplants alive because I forget to water them. And so I have fake houseplants, that's why. And so the sad thing is, like, relationships are like plants or trees or anything that's living. You have to water it. You have to tend to it. You have to put effort into your relationship, because when you don't, it's just going to die, just like a plant or a tree does. Well, maybe not trees because they're out in the, you know, outside, but, you know, inside, you have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of the relationship. If you don't, it's just going to die. You cannot be lazy like this guy, you know, sitting on the couch, maybe playing video games, watching TV by yourself, eating, ignoring your partner. That just will not work. The more you ignore your partner, the more your relationship is just going to fail, and it's just going to, you know, it's going to end probably. So you have to put in effort every single day. Do something for your partner. Do something for the two of you. You know, it's so important that you put in that effort every single day. You cannot slack, because so many people say, you know, if they get married, let's say, you know, oh, I'm married now, I don't have to do any work because I have them. I'm like, no, 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 no. That's when the work starts. You know, the beginning, that's the fun part. But you have to put in effort every single day. That's when the work starts. But if you do it regularly, it shouldn't be like a chore. It should be fun. It should be good, you know? So don't forget to put in that effort every single day. Talk to each other. In this world of technology, I love this, we do not have Wi-Fi, talk to each other, pretend it's 1995. Back in the 90s, before cell phones, before the internet, we didn't have so much to distract us from talking to each other. We now can sit down in the living room all night for hours on end and be on our phones and not even look up and talk to each other. Like, don't do that. It's okay to do sometimes, but don't neglect talking to your partner because you're distracted with, Facebook or Instagram or video games on your phone, anything, like talk to each other, spend time with each other. I don't care what you talk about. Talk about work, even if you think the other person's going to be bored by it. Do it anyway. Talk about what's going on in the world, whether it's good, whether it's bad. What do you think about it? Stimulate your mind, both of your minds. Talk about family, talk about your kids, talk about your hopes and dreams. What are your goals individually and together as a couple? Like, really talk to each other, because as I mentioned earlier, that's emotional intimacy. Talking to each other is emotional intimacy. So don't forget that. Sounds simple, but most people do forget to do that. You also need to consider each other's needs. Now, this goes back to being selfish. Sometimes we don't even know what our own needs are, but you'll have to figure that out. But ask your partner what their needs are. And this is what I learned from my ex-husband and that marriage, that I thought, hey, if you just communicate, because I have a PhD in communication and I'm a communication professor, I figured the more you communicate, how can you go wrong? Well, I communicated until I was blue in the face, but I realized that both partners need to put the other person's needs at least equal to, if not before, their own needs. Because when someone puts your needs at least equal to or before their own, don't you naturally want to also put their needs at least equal to or before your own? If not, you should. It makes you feel better when somebody does that. So, both people need to do this, though. Two people. It takes two people to do this. One person can't be holding up the end of the bargain and the other person doing nothing and being lazy. Because then it's like being in a relationship with a brick wall. You can talk to a brick wall, you can do whatever but a brick wall just doesn't change, So both people really need to think about their needs, what their partner's needs are, and really meet each other's needs. It's so important. Or else whoever's getting their needs not met is going to feel neglected. And then eventually they're going to have resentment. And once resentment comes, then it's really hard to get rid of, if not impossible. Well, that is it for this episode of Her Side, His Side. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope that you have learned some ideas and skills that you can really put into, making your marriage better or your romantic relationship better, or heck, any relationship better for that matter. And if you want any more personal coaching, I offer it. I can do anything from an email to a coaching call to whatever you want. So if any of this sounds interesting, but you want some more personalized advice, you can find me at drcarolmorgan.com. I also have a website by the same name, hersidehisside.com. It has a bunch of articles where you can read and try to apply to your life just like you do watching this. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you've enjoyed this. And please, share if you think that anybody else can, benefit from this. This is why I do it. I love teaching. I've taught in the classroom for many years, and now I'm trying to teach, this way now. Hopefully I can reach a lot more people. And, I talk about dating and single life, marriage, romantic relationships. And I also have videos on motivation, self-love, self-improvement. So, come back, subscribe, and spread the word, please. All right, well, that is it for this episode. And, again, Thank you so much for being here. I love you all. I appreciate you all. And until next time, peace out.